She broke his heart once before. Is Thomas willing to give her another chance? Will meeting the shapely, brown-eyed vixen turn out to be another mistake? What could go wrong during a short meeting between Thomas and Clara? Welcome to the Spinethrills channel, where your nightmares come true. The abandoned house didn't appear inviting at all, as Thomas Kinder stared with a slight shudder before climbing the ancient granite stairs of Raven House. How long he had hiked to get here, he couldn't be sure. He had planned to drive right up to the door of the place, but falling rocks and falling trees had shut down that plan halfway up Cascade Mountain Road. And, adding to his unease, purplish arcs from a rolling thunderhead were heading towards his direction from the north. Again, he read the text of his former girlfriend, Clara Collins, scratching his head. Pushing back strands of obsidian black hair, he groaned, reading the text a third time. "Meet me inside Raven House. We won't stay long." He thought to himself. Why? Was he here in front of this Gothic, Victorian abomination of black stone and dust? That was simple enough. He dropped everything once again for Clara. Once again, the fool ran to her after receiving her cryptic text to meet. The shapely, brown-eyed, chestnut-haired vixen had summoned him. Was it to rekindle their childhood friendship? Maybe they'd spark their romance again, as he had hoped, once more. But Thomas wasn't sure that was the case. Why reach out now, and why at this abysmal place? Thomas thought to himself, "Why do I keep falling for your tricks, Clara?" For a moment, he paused before trying to use the crumbling house's ancient front door. It was locked, of course. He shrugged and started pacing, then opted to walk around the left side of the vine-covered home. Maybe he could find a broken window or an open door. Twisting and pushing his way through the brush, receiving several scratches from the towering bushes that surrounded the decrepit house, he thought again of the message and of Clara's recent behavior. She's been so withdrawn from the world lately. But after 2020 and the year-long pandemic, isn't everybody? Which makes Clara's message even more strange. He paused, rethinking this mission, even as the wispy gray clouds continued to roll up and across Cascade Mountain. Pulling the hood of his windbreaker over his head, he hadn't expected to be out this long in the elements. He felt the first drops of chilled, icy mountain rain sting his hands. A menacing storm was moving in for sure. "Meet me inside Raven House. We won't stay long." He thought again, long and hard about Clara's text. Then walking to the rear of the place that seemed to be falling down. Thomas got lucky, finally. He spied a crushed oaken door that a nearby black walnut tree had crashed through, obviously a long time ago. Again, he paused outside as the storm winds picked up. He felt the wind gusts pushing him from behind, almost driving him inside the darkness with a threatening fury. Once more, he hesitated with an instinctual feeling, telling him that something wasn't right. Somewhere in his gut, he feared crossing over the threshold of that door. As his pulse raced and the storm began to strengthen, the thunder became deafeningly louder as crackled white flashes of lightning began to reach his location. Thomas stood fast. Then, as if Clara had somehow sensed he might turn coward and run from Raven House, he heard her voice. Or what he thought was Clara's sweet voice. Her voice seemed to sound like an echo. Maybe echo wasn't quite the right word. Maybe a hushed whisper from deep inside the shadowed and darkened house. "Thomas, you came this far. Meet me inside Raven House. I have so many things to say to you, which I should have told you long before. I promise we won't stay long. Why are we meeting here?" He questioned. "We could have met anywhere other than this old spooky house." Thomas pleaded and waited for a reply. There was no reply, but the wind howling through the ancient house's halls was the only other sound. There was the ear-splitting sound of thunder over Thomas's head, then a blinding, sudden crash of lightning which felled a poplar tree to his immediate right. The sudden falling of the tree forced him to rush inside the darkness of Raven House for his safety. Once inside, Thomas picked himself up off the leaf and litter-covered floor. He waited for his eyes to adjust to the darkness inside the place. There was still a small bit of outside light coming inside, but not much. In its illumination, he saw the shadows of several rats running as they moved deeper inside the house for their safety and out of the fury of the hellish storm. He heard their squeals as he walked further toward the interior of Raven House. Putting on a headlamp he brought, anticipating that he would need the light, Thomas entered the dust-filled place, still calling out for Clara. For the first 10 minutes in the darkness, as the storm winds continued to howl, there was no answer back from Clara. The storm outside growing even more fierce, with loud claps of thunder and crackling bursts of lightning, seemingly engulfing the house. Taking a deep, albeit a nervous breath, as he grew even more impatient at his situation, he glanced from right, then left, with the lamp several times. Thomas told himself he'd wait a little longer before he would leave, especially if she didn't answer him. He thought again of why they were meeting here, in such dreadfully dangerous conditions in this house. He then heard, "I'm glad you are here in Raven House. It's been too long, my love." Again, the voice sounded distant and whispering. To Thomas, the voice felt as though it traveled everywhere within the Gothic home. Thomas heard it above him. He heard her voice beneath him. He heard her voice around him, strangely enough. He heard Clara's voice going through him like a chilled, stormy wind. He answered back, "Where are you?" And she replied, "Come meet with me. I'm in the ballroom." Thomas squinted his eyes, trying to see Clara, or any movement for that matter, on the outer bands of his headlamp. But at best, he caught a shifting, shadowy silhouette. But as he approached the ballroom through the nearby hall, all he could see was a tattered red velvet curtain and nothing more. Walking deeper into the house, while shaking his head, he glanced at molded paintings on the walls, from what he thought might be from the 17th or 18th century. He saw plaster peeling from wood-planked walls and shreds of an archaic wallpaper mostly chewed away by the rats. He smelled the overwhelming odor of ammonia and decay long before he even reached the ballroom. The stench made Thomas's eyes water. It was so bad he could even taste the bitter, disgusting odor, and it caused his stomach to quickly become upset until he vomited. Wiping his mouth with his windbreaker sleeve, he moved into the ballroom to find Clara. Just a step or two into the ballroom, the floor gave out. Thomas fell into a hole of darkness beneath the plaster and wood of Raven House. His terrifying fall ended with a sudden crash, and he heard an ominous crack, breaking his spine as he landed at the bottom of the pit. Unable to walk, unable to move, Thomas screamed with a mixture of pain and terror. It was several agonizing hours later, as Thomas's headlamp, which had survived his fall into the depths of this house, began to flicker out. Then, as Thomas lay in a broken, immobile heap on the floor of the pit and alone in the darkness, he heard a more hideous sound. It was the exuberant squeal of the hungry rats seeming to encircle him now. In pain and sobbing, beginning to feel despair at his current situation, he looked out in the darkness, his eyes now beginning to adjust to the sudden darkness, and he saw another seemingly half-eaten dead body. Clutching what appeared to be a cell phone, the screen was obviously cracked, while the body was unrecognizable. But the cell phone with the pink heart cover was. That phone belonged to Clara. For some reason, she too had come to Raven House. And, just like Thomas, Claire too had fallen through the rat-chewed floor to meet her destiny. Then, As the rats closed in to ravage Thomas, one question remained with him until his soul departed Raven House. Who had sent the text messages? Surely the rats would know. I hope you enjoyed this story. Please subscribe to my channel. Also, if you have a true story that is scary, creepy, or horrifying, which is well written, and you would like me to share, send the story to spinethrills@gmail.com.